Hello and welcome to silverThreads. In today's Let's Not Meet stories, we have someone who made up a whole relationship, a near kidnapping by an Uber driver, a couple being followed home by a suspicious man, and more. Now, let me tell you a story. My husband and I had been married in May, but he was still living in student housing until his lease was up, which ended up being in August of 2019. We found the perfect-sized apartment for our needs. In the city his school was located, it was kind of a sketchy area. Despite most of it looking decent, there was definitely some questionable activity going on at all times of day. To make the situation worse, we didn't have a car at this time, so we had to walk and ride the city bus everywhere we needed to go. It felt unsafe to me since I've only ever lived in small towns growing up. One night, the unsafe feeling really kicked into high gear when we had to get groceries on foot. On the way home to our apartment, we cut through a darkened parking lot. A man emerged from between two buildings that were just on the edge of the parking lot. He had the worst vibe about him, and that made me go into high alert. My husband tried to calm me down by being the rational person he is. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I continued to look over my shoulder. Sure enough, every turn we made, he made. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing on end at this point. I looked at my husband and I told him that this man was deliberately following us. He was taking each turn we were, and he stayed far enough away from us to where it wouldn't look too suspicious. I told my husband that even though we were tired and had groceries, we needed to take a different route home. He continued to follow us for another block or so, and that is when we decided to book it. We turned down a random street, found a car, and squatted behind it. When the man turned the corner, he was looking every which way for us. Every time he came close to the car we were hiding behind, we would slowly and as quietly as we could sneak to the other side. I called up my mom in tears, trying to stay as quiet and calm as I could. Yeah, looking back, maybe calling the police, even on a suspicion, would have probably been better. Anyway, thank God the man eventually gave up. Once we knew for sure he was gone, we walked the rest of the way home, and locked the door the minute we shut it. It felt like my husband and I were in a thriller horror movie, and we were the main characters trying to survive. I don't know what that man's intentions were. I don't want to know. To the creepy shadow lurker, let's never meet. I really wish I didn't have to write this down, but I don't think I'll be getting much sleep tonight anyways. So I figured I might as well share with you what's going on in my house right now. A couple of points relevant to the story. I'm a student who's currently pursuing his higher education abroad. The country I reside in is the Netherlands. I live with two other people whose rooms are on the same floor as mine. One flatmate in particular is slightly problematic. More on that later. I cannot possibly go out because there's a curfew in place, and if I go out, I risk facing a fine. I live on the third floor, and the living room is located on the second floor. I work from home, and I took a break from work to go and wash my plate in the kitchen. I usually eat in my room because I want to be close to my laptop in case something at work happens. The kitchen is located right next to the living room on the second floor. And in order to get there, I need to go downstairs and move through the living room. Please keep in mind that it's 11 p.m. here in the Netherlands, so it's pretty dark outside. So I go down and I turn on the lights in the kitchen, without turning the lights in the living room on. I am already pretty familiar with the route to the kitchen despite the darkness, as I have been living here for approximately a year and a half now. I washed my plate and right as I am about to leave the kitchen and turn off the lights, I see a silhouette getting up from the couch, and then lying down again. This is the moment when my heart sank and when I started wondering if I'm seeing things. I wasn't brave enough to check and see what's going on, so I lowered my body down and really quietly went upstairs. I was literally crawling on the stairs at one point. So I finally reached my floor and then I knocked on one of my flatmate's rooms. I respect his privacy and I will not share any details about his appearance, but for the sake of clarity, I am going to refer to him as Kevin from now on. Now Kevin is a fascinating individual to say the least. He has 3 kids from multiple women, and according to him, there's a 4th one on the way. He is generally nice, but he tends to get crazy drunk, and some of the parties he throws at our place tend to be incredibly loud and unpleasant for the rest of the tenants. After our landlord warned him, he no longer seems to invite people over. Thank God for that. But he still gets drunk pretty frequently, and it's usually a mess. I'm not going to share more stories, but based on my experiences, I assumed that if there's anyone that knows what the fuck is going on downstairs, it would be him. So Kevin opens the door and I ask him if he knows anything about the person sleeping on the couch in the living room. I have calmed down a bit since. At first I reached the conclusion that this is one of Kevin's friends who simply crashed at our couch. No big deal, but I wanted to make sure just in case. Turns out, I was only halfway there. This person is in fact here because of Kevin. But they're not a friend of Kevin. They're a homeless person that was found by Kevin on his way home today. They have never met each other before, but Kevin felt bad for them and offered them to sleep on the couch at our place for the night. I'm fucking speechless. I don't mind having people over every now and then, and I have nothing against homeless people. But I think that inviting a complete stranger over to spend the night at your place without at least discussing this with your flatmates is somewhat inconsiderate, to say the least. Moreover, there's a fucking sickness raging on worldwide, so this whole situation isn't exactly in our best interest either. I did consider going to a friend's place and spending the night there, but I'm not really interested in going downstairs for the time being. Plus, I risk getting a fine, as going out after 9 PM here is prohibited. So yeah, here we are now. It's relatively quiet now. Let's hope it's going to stay that way. If you're liking the video so far, then like the video because it really does help a lot. Subscribe now to support the channel and get weekly creepypasta and true scary stories. Enjoy the rest of the video. Back in 2013, I was living with my ex at the time, who lived near a nice country village. And as I was in between jobs at the time, I picked up a job at a local garden center. It was casual retail work, fairly decent pay, and easygoing enough that I could take coffee breaks frequently and wear basically whatever I liked, as long as I wore my work polo shirt. It was walking distance from my ex's house, and full of people of all ages who were the most lovely people I've ever met. Most of the regular customers who came to the garden center were usually sweet old people who would visit the cafe because we had free teas and discounted lunches for OAPs if they had a store card. So you often got to know all of them, and some of them we gave nicknames. Most of them sweet, like Pink Hair Lady, a badass 80-year-old grandma who wore a tasseled leather jacket and bright pink hair. Then there was Camper Van Couple, who used to drive a really cool camper van with bright orange flowers painted on it. You get the idea. With Creepy Artist Man, though, he gave most of the young girls weird vibes. He wore a straw hat, was in his late 40s, and had round, gold-rimmed glasses and would wear strange graphic shirts with naked women on them. Or Professional Pussy Patrol sort of slogans on the back. He always wore ripped jeans where his knees were always hanging out of them, which were always dirty with paint or mud or something. He had this weird half smile that would never leave his face, and a kind of leer that made people feel uncomfortable. He would take off his glasses and clean them constantly, which kind of made you feel like he was trying to get a better look at the girls who worked there, especially the younger ones. 16-plus school leavers usually. Anyway, it was a roasting hot summer's day, and I had gratefully accepted the job of watering the hanging baskets outside, where I could avoid the humid, sweaty heat of the greenhouses. I was wearing black shorts and my red polo, and my tool belt to prune and deadhead plants as I went. With the hose in my hand and sunnies on my face, I was busy but enjoying the solitary job at the quietest part of the garden center. Well, hello there. Out of practically nowhere, he slipped behind some wooden trellises and looked me up and down, smiling with his weird, too small teeth. His eyes lingered on me for what felt like an uncomfortable few seconds, and I turned off my hose and asked him if he needed anything. He shook his head and kind of shrugged, still smirking at my legs. I'll call him CAG for ease. Okay, sir. Have a nice day. Let me know if you need anything. I turned to continue. I've never seen you here before. You're a new one. Huh? Me? Well, I've been here for 8 months now. I must have missed the memo that a beauty like you started. You have a nice tan. You look young. Thanks. I'm 23. Anyways, I have to get back to work. Nice to meet you, Casey Cat Lady. I suddenly remember my name badge and get slightly irritated that he now knew my full name. I make a beeline for the smoking area, where the tool shed was, with an excuse to grab some smaller gardening gloves, and by the time I returned to the floor, he had left. As the weeks went by, he would come into the store regularly, usually mid-afternoon. Coincidentally, or so I thought, around the time I started my shift. Most of the time I was the only cashier, so I would have to serve him. He would buy the smallest, most pointless things, like floristry wire or a tiny bag of birdseed. It seemed like he would purposefully make a purchase with the intention of interacting with me. He would make comments about my appearance, statements mostly like, "You have your hair different today. Yesterday you had it down. You have new glasses." Or, "That's a different lip color than yesterday." He would always announce my name loudly and deliberately during every interaction. I felt uncomfortable, but I was 23 and just politely shrugged it off. Around Christmas time, I was decorating the artificial trees, and he cornered me in the forest of them at the back of the store. He jumped out from behind one and made me jump, to which I was kind of pissed about him doing because I dropped a glass ornament and it had smashed. He bent down also and tried to help, grabbing my wrist and telling me not to touch the glass. His grip was scarily tight and forceful, and his hands were clammy and gross. I slipped my hand out of his grip and asked if I could help him with anything. That's when it got weird. He pulled out a leaflet from his back pocket and told me he was an artist and had a Christmas art show happening at the local church hall, and he wanted me to go with him. He told me that he was a painter, and he thought that I would like his work. I had never indicated that I was interested in art to him, or anyone else for that matter, which is why I thought it was strange. I asked him if he wanted me to pin the leaflet to the local event board, and he reached out and touched my arm and said, "No, the invitation is specifically for you." He pointed his finger and jabbed it into my breast as he said, "You." So I'm standing there in a dark corner, obscured from view by artificial Christmas trees, just kind of cornered by this guy who was touching me. I cringed away and said, "I'm busy with my boyfriend that day. Sorry," and kind of scampered off. I remember feeling really strange after that. The fact he grabbed my wrist and jabbed his finger into my chest that way. I told a few of my colleagues about it. They all told me they would warn me next time he was in the store, so I could maybe hang out in the storeroom until he was gone. Well, that memo must have missed a few of the temporary Christmas staff, because one day I get told by one, "Your friend is asking for you at the tills." It wasn't unusual for my friends to stop by, as it was fairly popular for gifts, etc. So thinking it was maybe my ex's mom or something, I head to the till, and there he is. He's holding a piece of paper. I cringed, but he had seen me now. So I walk over and ask what he needed from me. He passed the paper over and asked me to open it. Folded up was a drawing of me, with exaggerated breasts and cartoon-like eyes watering the hanging baskets in a sexual kind of position. I kind of stood there and said thank you, but I couldn't keep it as I thought it was inappropriate to take gifts from customers. I handed it back to him and he kind of looked at me with this angry stare. He turned around and walked out without another word. By this point, I had had enough. I knocked on my manager's door and told him about the whole scenario that just happened, and all the previous interactions I had had with him over the past year. He watched the CCTV and agreed that it was so strange the way he gave me this gross picture, and told me he would talk to him if he came back. He praised me for my reaction to his advances, and said I was doing the right thing, and he would try and see him off next time. The next day was a Sunday, and I was not due into work. My boss calls me and tells me he just received a call from headquarters stating that an anonymous caller had called in to report a staff member inappropriately coming on to a customer. The staff member they had described and named was me. The caller had said that I had been inappropriate towards him at work, offered to have sex with him, had led him on, and was obviously promiscuous, and that I had been pursuing him for over a year. The jerk even described a fictitious relationship we had had, and ranted loudly about how I had been cheating on my boyfriend before hanging up. Headquarters luckily didn't believe a word, as my manager had already mentioned the guy to one of the higher-ups, but they thought it was wise to let me know about this crazy guy, and suggest I report it to the police. The next day, I did just that. The officer I spoke to said that he matched the description of a man who was a local pest, someone who often harasses young girls in the local area. He was also known to stalk girls in his car, and had attempted to abduct a young girl 4 years ago. The police officers assured me they would file the report and talk to him officially, and that he was not allowed in the garden center or anywhere near me again, and if he did, I was to call the police and he would be arrested. Unfortunately, though, it never stopped him sending a ranting letter to my workplace, addressed to me saying he would kill himself if I didn't take him back and receive his gift he drew of me. Fortunately, the police saw this as unsolicited contact, and he was thankfully arrested. So, creepy artist guy? Let's not meet ever again. So this occurred mid-January 2019. It was around 10 p.m. and my dad and I were taking the dog for a walk around the block. As we were crossing the road, a girl in her late teens or early 20s came running towards us, screaming something about how he's beating her up. She led us into a small nearby terrace. As we entered the living room, someone threw a ceramic cup in our direction, which smashed on the wall right next to our heads. There was a shirtless Aboriginal guy, also late teens or early 20s, pacing around in an agitated manner. He appeared to be drunk or high. There was another girl in the kitchen holding a baby, and she was screaming something at the guy. The first girl told us that he's on meth. We attempted to de-escalate the situation, as my dad spoke to the girls to get a better idea of what was going on, and I followed the guy outside, where I asked him some questions, but he gave no intelligible answers. I seem to have a lapse in memory at this point, because all I remember is next thing we're on the footpath, and he's lunging at my dad. They fought briefly, and I tried to get him in a headlock, but he broke free and ran inside the house. One of the girls started screaming about how he was going to get a knife. We decided to get out of there. Fuck it. But just at that moment, he emerged at the end of the hallway. He stood still for a moment, and I saw that he was holding a large kitchen knife. He quickly charged down the hall at us. As we began to run away, I stopped like an idiot to pick up my metal water bottle I had left on the ground during the struggle. I can't exactly explain why I did that, but I think I figured I would use it as a weapon if he chased us. Like, to throw it at him, or use as a club or something. I was in such a hurry that as I picked it up, I slipped and fell onto the pavement. My dad was a bit further up the street by now, not having initially seen my fall. The guy came out the gate as I stood up, and we wrestled briefly. I tried to force his wrists back, since for all I knew, he was still holding the knife. My dad ran back and hit him with a plastic garden chair, bringing him down on the front path. We held him down, yelling for the girls to call the police. I picked up the knife, which he had dropped at some point, and threw it as far as I could up the street. The guy tried to fool us by closing his eyes and pretending to snore, hoping that we would loosen our grip on him. Whenever I think about the incident, even though we both could have got stabbed, remembering him doing that always makes me laugh. Another odd detail, some guy walked past and offered to tie him up with some cable ties, but we said no. We tried to keep him down until the police arrived. He would struggle hard at times and completely give up at others. He was getting really sweaty and seemed to get a surge of adrenaline because he managed to slip loose of our grip on him. He ran inside and slammed the fly screen door after him, then stood there and stared at us in what must have been an attempt to intimidate us. He walked down the hall and out of sight. We heard police sirens and retreated into the street. About 5 cops rushed into the house armed with pepper spray, and shortly came out with the guy in cuffs. He was arrested, and the police kept us there for at least 3 hours to give our statements, which was difficult for me since it was all a blur. 4 months later, I found out that the guy stabbed someone in the neck in the exact same location, and is now in jail. It's disturbing to think that he wasn't bluffing when he charged us with the knife, and that something like this could happen so close to home. This happened like 10 years ago, when I was in my first year of university. Apologies, this is a long one. A week or two before classes started, I moved into student accommodation. It was shitty. A huge block of apartments built in the 60s in the center of town. I was keen to make friends, as everyone was, and made sure to get to know all the people in my student halls. It was during this time I met Mike and John, 2 friends who had known each other before university started. Both were pretty geeky, cool, I thought, guys, and were easy to get along with, platonically. I also met a girl, let's call her Erica, and together with Mike and John, we made a little friendship group. We'd hang out often, and go clubbing and have dinners in our shitty kitchen. It was nice. Eventually it became clear that John and Mike had crushes on me, which was unreciprocated, and I started to feel a little uncomfortable hanging out with them so much. I had gotten into classes and had met some fun people on my course. I also grew up in the city that I went to university, so it was easy to fall back into my old friendship group, and I'd often end up staying at my parents' home. I also started dating my ex-boyfriend again. Basically, I was in our student accommodation less and less, and didn't really have time to hang out with John and Mike. Around that time, things got weird. It started with random Facebook accounts adding me and hurling abuse at me. To be honest, Facebook trolls were common back then, so I didn't really care. I just got weirded out when they started adding some of my family members on Facebook, and I asked them to stop. I mostly ignored the account at first, as nothing too horrific came from it. I did, however, have some suspicions that it was either John or Mike, due to some things they had said. But again, I didn't care enough to make anything out of it. Then one day, when I was walking into the student accommodation, I heard someone shouting "slut" from the building. The first time, I honestly thought it was just drunken students messing about with each other. I didn't think for a second that it would be directed at me. Another day, again, as I'm walking towards my accommodation, I hear male voices shouting, "Slut! Slut!" And now I'm weirded out because no one else is around. The next time I'm walking towards my building, I once again hear, "Slut! Slut!" I whip my head towards the windows of the building just in time to see Mike and John ducking down from the windows. I yell back that they're fucking idiots and they can go fuck themselves, and I carry on with my day. From then on, I point blank refuse to speak to them. Not even a hello in passing. A month later, I go to a nightclub with Erica, and we end up bumping into Mike and John. They apologize profusely, and I am always way too nice when I'm drunk, so I forgave them. We hung out for the rest of the night with Mike in particular, getting progressively drunker and weirder. So we decide to call it a night and head back towards our accommodation. I'd asked Erica to come to my room after for a snack, so we both got off at my floor, the 10th floor, when Mike decides he wants to come with us. At this point, he had been getting weird for too long, so we stand on the landing of my floor. I'm not about to let him into my room or my floor's kitchen, and I try to stand my ground and tell him we want to call it a night. He is completely fixated on me at this point, not Erica, and keeps trying to hug me, while I'm telling him to please leave and go to bed as he's acting like a drunk idiot. While this conversation is happening, it's starting to feel darker and weirder, and my heart's starting to beat fast. I've completely sobered up at this point, and I just want him to go away. All of a sudden, I hear the door to the stairs open, and Erica is running up the stairs. Not walking, running. We both obviously feel that this was getting dangerous, but I could not believe that she would abandon me like that. I never ever forgave her for that. Anyway, as if I wasn't terrified enough already, now that I'm alone with Mike, my adrenaline is going crazy. For reference, he's easily 6'4" and quite overweight, whilst I'm 5'3" and was at the time 110 pounds. I had grown up in a roughish area, so I always felt like I had a lot of street smarts and could handle myself. And I did well on this occasion, but man, I've never felt so vulnerable. And I've been in some shitty situations. He keeps asking me to let him in my room, and I just keep looking at him straight in the eyes and saying, no, 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 no. All this time, he's trying to pull me in for a hug and put his arm around my waist and kiss my face. And I'm just ducking and diving under his arms, pushing him away or just backing away from him. I felt like a cornered animal. This went on for like 20 minutes. I put on my best voice of authority and say firmly, "You are not coming to my room. This is the last time I'm telling you. I'm getting pissed off now. You need to go to your own room and go to bed." He finally says okay, and I try to confidently walk towards my room so he can't see how scared I am. I felt like if he saw my fear, he'd know I was powerless and he'd just try to force me. The way the floor plan is, there's a lobby and then a group of rooms on either side. There is an initial set of unlocked doors you have to walk through, then a short hallway to another door that locks, but we barely ever locked it. And then another hall with our kitchen and all of our apartment doors, which we always locked. I walked slowly to the unlocked doors, open them, and then, when I know he can't see me, I run for my life to the locked door. My whole body is shaking at this point. I go through the second door and quickly lock it behind me. The minute the lock clicks, I hear the initial set of doors slamming open, and boom, 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 boom of Mike running down the hall and trying to open the door I just locked. I've just taken my hand off the lock when he starts shaking the doorknob and slamming on the door to the point that I think he's going to break it down. I run to my apartment and lock my apartment door. At this point, I just want someone to save me. I'm freaking out, so I call my boyfriend. My toxic as fuck boyfriend thinks I'm exaggerating and that I probably led this guy on. I promise all of you I did not. I was never a flirty type of person, and Mike had no reason to ever think I liked him like that. I'm trying to convince him to come and get me because I'm scared, but he refuses. All the while, I can still hear Mike banging on the door. We speak for 15 minutes and hang up. When we hang up, I see that I have around 30 to 40 missed calls, all from Mike. He'd also left several voicemails, all of them saying the same crap. It was him speaking in this weird high-pitched voice. "Please, Jaffa Cakes, please. I just want to watch you sleep. Please, Jaffa Cakes. I promise I won't do anything. I just want to cuddle with you, please. I just want to lie in bed with you, please." This went on and on. It grossed me out so much. I just wanted to sleep. But I felt so unsafe, and I could still hear him trying to open the door to the hallway. Eventually, the banging subsides and I start feeling safer. Around 10 minutes later, the fire alarms go off. I could not believe how unlucky I was. We have to evacuate the building. I'm contemplating just staying in my room because I'm terrified Mike is still on my floor, but I hear the people on either side of my room opening their doors, and I think it's just safer to be with people at this point. We go downstairs and outside, and I spot Mike scouring the crowd, obviously looking for me, glassy-eyed and crazy looking. I just try to make myself as small as possible and stay hidden amongst the crowd. Firemen end up coming, and after 20 minutes they shout for everyone from floor 10 to come forward. Out of 18 floors? I don't know why, but I thought Mike had put them up to it so he could find me. Which was obviously silly, but I was hesitant to expose myself from my hiding place to go over to the firemen. Once I do, the firemen start asking us which one of us set off the fire alarm because it came from floor 10. I don't know why, but it took a while for it to register for me that Mike had set off the fire alarm on my floor when he realized I wouldn't open the door to try and flush me out. What a psycho! I'm still trying to keep a mental note of where he is in case he does anything, and see him sitting on the floor crying with John consoling him. I think John spoke some sense into him, because I didn't hear from him again that day. I ended up leaving that university a month or so later. Aside from that experience, and being seriously disappointed by all my new friends, I didn't particularly like my course either. Mike kept trying to text me and call me, I assume when drunk because it was always late at night, for years afterwards. And his little troll account kept trying to find out where I'd gone and what I was up to. I hope he got help in the end, or at least learned how to handle his drink. So Mike, let's not meet again. I have a few, but I'll start with this one because it's the most dangerous. One night, my boyfriend and I were out drinking and hanging out with our friends, and went back to our other friend's apartment that lived about 10-15 minutes away from us in the next town over. It was getting pretty late, and we both had work the next day, so we called an Uber to pick us up. So our Uber gets there, everything is fine. We make casual small talk, as you usually do in Ubers or Lyfts. The vibe was fine, the dude seemed nice enough, nothing to worry about. I was just exhausted and wanted to go home. Then I remember feeling like wide awake out of nowhere. We get to the end of a street, and I recognize it as being close-ish to our homes. And while I'm really bad at directions, this was a turn where it was like, you turn right, you're going towards our homes. You turn left, you're clearly driving in the complete opposite direction. The guy gets to the stoplight and flicks his left blinker on. I immediately start looking around and look to my boyfriend, who's clearly on edge. My boyfriend asks the driver where he's going because this is clearly the wrong way, and he tells my boyfriend not to worry, that he's from the area and he knows your shortcut. Whatever, we both relax a little bit, especially because this was a main road and there were plenty of side streets around that he could have been cutting through. Then he gets to another stoplight and has the ability to either make a right, which would put him going towards the general direction of where we lived, or left, which was going in the direction of the next town over. He flicks his left blinker on again, and at this point, I noticed that he has the Uber app and GPS tracking totally off. His entire phone is off. So there's nothing tracking his driving or location, and he's not being monitored by the app. My heart starts beating, and I get out my phone to call 911, and my car keys, because I have this shiv-like stabby weapon thing as a keychain. My boyfriend flies out of his seat and lunges towards the front seat, so he's like half standing up, and starts yelling, asking the guy where the fuck he's going because we know that this is the wrong way. The guy immediately flicks his right blinker on instead, and skirts into the right lane instead of the left, where he had previously been. He says sorry over and over again, and my boyfriend says, "You know what? Never mind. We're gonna get out right here. This is fine. Please unlock the doors." When he went to unlock the doors, the driver freaked out, got really defensive and on edge, and was like, "No, I'm sorry. I promise I'll take you home now. I'm going the right way now. I'm so sorry, buddy. I got you." Almost admitting that he was clearly taking us in the totally wrong direction. I can't remember if we just rode the rest of the way in that Uber because there were likely no other ones around at that hour, and we felt like we called the guy out enough that he wouldn't do anything, or if we actually got out of the car and began to walk home. Like I said, very exhausting drunk night. The most chilling parts about this for me was how he had his app off, and how he was so quick to correct himself as soon as we noticed. Like, he didn't even try to come up with a cover story to justify his actions. He admitted that before my boyfriend freaked him out, he was not taking us to our destination. We reported that guy the next day on the Uber app, and have never come in contact with him since. I don't know what he was planning, but I pray to whoever is up there that he didn't have the opportunity to scare anyone else like that ever again. Sketchy Uber driver who was very bad at lying, let's not ever meet again. If you made it this far, then you are the best of the best. Like the video if you think it deserves it, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you have a story you'd like me to read, please send it to storiesforsilverthreads@gmail.com. Also, every episode gets uploaded to the SilverThreads podcast, so if you prefer just the audio, try listening to me there. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time with another story.